Hey, and welcome to another episode of Monday Moments, a show in which we take a deeper dive into Sunday sermon. My name is Pastor James, and with me today is Matt Delvescovo. Travis is out this week traveling, and so Matt, you're filling in.
I'm the captain now.
You are the captain now. It is your ship. Where are we going?
Well, anywhere I'd like. No, dive into your message. We talked about Galatians 5 yesterday, and you kind of started off with when Paul's talking about how we're running a race, and kind of like the contrast of, like the casual Christian versus someone who's really kind of sold out, and how someone who's sold out is running a race, and maybe someone who's kind of just on the outside is taking a more casual pace. And that's sort of like where the Judaizers, who Paul was speaking to in his letter to the Galatians, was talking about, like, it's really easy to judge from that point.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy to sit back and look at when you're just kind of casual. You're not really like, I don't know, you're not invested on the same level. So it's easier to kind of look at what others are doing and judge or critique or whatever. But I don't know, could you dive into that a little bit, like where that analogy and how that breaks down?
We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Galatians is really broken up into kind of three movements, which is pretty standard for kind of any Paulian letter. He always talks about a couple things. He talks first two chapters, he's kind of giving his own background, like the reasons why he's qualified to do this. And then 3 and 4, he really gives the doctrine of grace. And so 5 and 6 is really the personal application. And so now he's addressing, like, how does this apply to our life? And in multiple different letters, Paul refers to this life that we lead as a race, and we're just we have a responsibility, and specifically he's now addressing this this belief that the Judaizers have kind of tried to weave into this message of grace, that you've got to do all of these different things, and so Paul comes and he says, like, hey, we do have some personal responsibility here. Like, this is not a, hey, let's just accept grace and then we're good, we make it into heaven, you really don't have to do anything else. He's coming now and he's saying, look, this is how grace should play out in your life. Like, you're in this race for the rest of your life, and we should constantly be moving towards this, not as an attempt to somehow earn our righteousness, but there is something that grace should be producing in our life. It should be growing and changing. And so he comes to him in verse 7 and he says, you were running so well. He acknowledges the fact that they really were doing a good job with this, but then he transitions to this question of, like, who hindered you? Like, what happened in this moment that got you off of this really good course, this race that you were running? And how do we now? He begins to go in and talk a little bit about, like, how do we adjust it in such a way that we're actually back in this race that we're running. So
does it so, like, you use like the James and what he talked about a little bit, as far as, like, what good it, like, faith without works is dead, sort of that concept. And Paul, like, a lot of the times leans very grace compared to even James. Like, what James says, we see what Paul says. It's very, like, Paul's very grace. James is very, like, well, it's not just grace. It almost sometimes feels like they're, like, kind of responding to each other. But I guess, like, when we say, like, what is that evidence? Like, what is the evidence of grace in someone's life? What would that look like? What would that feel like?
Yeah. So one of the things I said last week is, I think the easiest way to identify a very legalistic faith, which is really what the Judaizers were pushing towards. Like, hey, you've got to do all these things. Like, there is this law that governs everything that you do, and you've got to you've got to hit all of these marks. So yeah, grace got you in the door, but the law is really what's going to carry you forward in this. And Paul deals with this from the standpoint of kind of looking at it and saying, look, there should be some very obvious signs. And what I said last week was that the easiest way to identify legalism is a lack of love. So you go and you look at another one of Paul's letters. Paul's writing to the church at Corinth, 1 Corinthians, familiar chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, talks about love. It's all about what does this look like. And I think that there's always this tension a little bit when you read like the Pauline letters, and then you go and you read James, and you're like, well, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And James is really saying essentially the same thing that Paul is saying. He's just saying it in such a way that it sounds more works-based than it is grace. But what James is really trying to convey is that grace should have these very evident works being produced in your life. It's not that, oh, I've accepted grace and now I'm trying to make sure that I do all the right things. He's saying when you really understand grace and what does it mean? So what is faith? Because that's a big word that James uses a lot. Faith. Faith without works is dead. You and I were having a conversation, I think last week, and you were talking about what it really meant to you to follow Jesus, and it comes down to this idea. It's like, no, I'm giving him control over everything in my life. Yeah. And if our faith is giving Jesus control in every area of our life, and when we look at Jesus's life was full of works. Now he had no righteousness to earn. Right. This was the basic result of who he was. And so if I'm putting my faith in Jesus, I should look like Jesus. Well, Jesus's life, I mean, we can point to a lot of things that he did, and we can look at the way that he loved people, the way that he cared for people, the way that he listened to people, the way that he healed people, the way that he came alongside people. And so there was very obvious things that made Jesus different. And so when James says faith without works is dead, what he's saying is like, look, if your faith is in Jesus, in other words, if I'm giving him rule over my life, he's going to lead me into things that are pretty obviously different than the way that the rest of the world is living. And Paul looks at it, he just approaches it from a little bit of a different place. What's interesting, and we're going to get into, is like you get into verse 13 of chapter 5, and Paul begins to say, hey, don't allow this liberty to be used for your goodness. Like, right. It should look a certain way. And so we're actually getting ready to get into some of those things that Paul says, this is what a life should look like. We looked at 1 Thessalonians yesterday. There's a lot of different areas that you can go to that Paul says, hey, look, love looks like this. Yeah. And so God is love. He's the creator of love. He's the origin. And so you don't get to define love however you want to. It should look a very specific way. And so as much as they look like maybe they conflict at times, in fact, when Martin Luther was talking about these things, one of the things, Luther refers to James as the straw gospel, because he was coming out of Catholicism, which was so works-based. Yeah. And so he calls it the straw gospel. He says it's not worth anything but to be torn out and used as fodder for the fire, because he was viewing it from this works-based. He was like, no, James had this works-based, but that's not what James was really leaning towards at all. And so, yeah, it's this delicate balance. And I think the biggest challenge with that is the only one who really knows the motives behind the things that I'm doing is me and the Lord. And so it can look very good on the outside, but in my heart, am I doing this because of my faith in Jesus, or am I doing this because I feel like it gives me some sort of clout in the kingdom of God?
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, from even just a practical application of that, like a works mentality makes me almost like performative in my faith. It makes me think like, well, what are other people, how do they see me?
Yeah.
Which in turn makes me look at others that way. Like, how am I seeing them? And almost like back to that runner's analogy of like, I'm looking at others and kind of critiquing them because I'm worried about what people think of me. And it's almost like the way Paul's approaching it is we apply because we want us to be the subject. So we apply the grace, like I get all the grace. But really it's almost like, no, this is grace given to you to give to others so that you're not critical. You're not like constantly trying to pick people apart or see how other people measure up.
Yeah, and he addresses that a little bit when he tells us what to do. He says to encourage one another. Like we've all probably been in those situations. I mean, lots of sports going on. The World Series just ended, Saturday night, college football, pro football, all these different things. There's a lot of times like we sit on the sidelines from our couch or our living room and we're encouraging our favorite team to do good. But our encouragement doesn't go really far. But if you've ever been on a team, when you're out there in the battle and your teammates that are out there on the field with you are coming alongside and they're like, hey man, like we got this, let's keep going. There's something about that encouragement. And I think it's a beautiful way to look at our life as believers, that we're going to come alongside people at times in our own race that, maybe we're in a season where we just feel like we're just sprinting forward. And we're going to come alongside people that are struggling. And Paul says, look, when you come up alongside someone who's maybe in just trying to break through to that next place, he's like, we should be encouraging one another to these things. Another place he says, encourage one another to love and good deeds. Like there's a place in all of this where we should be encouraging one another towards these things. And that encouragement is best received from a place of a place of sameness. Like, hey, we're all in this together. So don't give up. Really keep pushing forward.
Okay. So then moving on through what you talked about. As we get, my favorite part of your message was when we got to like the Galatians 5, like 9 through 12. It's just like the little leaven's the whole lump. That whole portion. Can you dive into that a little bit more?
So there's I'll use an analogy from woodworking. There's a lot of times that when we're cutting in a roof or something, we'd be framing a house, we would always cut a pattern. And so if you're framing in and you've got a bunch of the same things that you have to cut, what you do at the beginning is you make a pattern, and then you use that pattern and you continue to use that pattern to lay it on. I remember one time I didn't really understand the concept super well, and so it's like we cut this first one and then I laid it on there and then I sent the pattern up to the top and then I cut the second one and I sent it up, I used it as the pattern and used it as the pattern. I get 6 or 7 into it and it's like, it's way off because it's a different pattern every single time. It's just, and so that saw cut gets moved over a little bit more and it grows and it grows and it grows. And so you get not too far down and you realize that because you didn't use the same pattern for everything, all of a sudden you're far off of where you intended to be. And I think Paul he's looking at this and he's saying, look, these little compromises, that we make, a little leaven, just a little bit of a difference, makes a huge difference in the end. And I think because things oftentimes seem like very small compromises, insignificant compromises, and in and of themselves they may be insignificant. But if you make 6 or 7 insignificant compromises along the way, all of a sudden you end up way way apart from where you actually began. It funny, back in the growing up here in New Braunfels back in the probably the mid to late 90s. The New Braunfels Herald Zeitung, our local newspaper, it's when the Guadalupe was still like, that was the river to float.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would have these really big weekends, Memorial, Labor Day, 4th of July weekend, and the Guadalupe River would just be like from bank to bank, just covered in tubes.
Wow.
And one of the things that they would always do on Monday morning is they would post the fecal count from the river. It was like the most disgusting thing. And you would see, like, they would post, like, what was the fecal count before the river, before the weekend, and what is it afterwards? And you start thinking about it, and you're like, all of those little contributions along the way and how much it changed. And it's almost repulsive. And I think there's a lot of believers in their life that they wake up one day and they're just really, they're almost repulsed with where their life has ended up, or with how this recent failure really affected them. And that's always the question, like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
I've told, I've told a number of working with marriages and things like this. I'm like, look, affairs don't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a single decision. This is a series of, like, nobody wakes up and thinks today's the day I'm just going to wreck my marriage.
Right.
There's all of these little compromises along the way, and I think that the Christian life is really the same way, and it's what Paul was. He was really cautioning them against. He says, "Look, I know that these things seem insignificant, but just a little bit of." Of wrong thinking, of wrong motives, it's going to affect like every single part, not just of your life. It's going to affect every part of your community.
Yeah.
And so be really, really careful that you don't get away. And he says from the message of the one who called you. Like, he points back to the pattern. Jesus is that pattern for us.
This is kind of an off, but this one always trips me up, and I wonder if you could clear it up. When he says the stumbling block of the cross has been abolished, how does that fit into the pattern? And, like, as far as, like, how is he saying, like, the cross becomes a stumbling block because we're just constantly trying to measure up against it, or what is?
Yeah, because he's speaking. I mean, in this instance, he's speaking to Gentiles, but this was originally this was like all of this is very Jewish belief that's like, hey, we're gonna get to this place, and the cross for these Judaizers was a big stumbling block, because it all of a sudden it didn't. This is an important note. It didn't abolish the law.
Right.
It fulfilled the law.
Right.
But it was very hard for them to accept that they no longer had to make all these sacrifices, that once and for all, this has been done. And when Jesus comes and he goes to the cross and he overcomes sin and death, like, it's this huge thing that's like, look, this has been dealt with in full.
I see.
You don't have to continue to wrestle with this. You just have to accept the grace that Jesus gave to us through that. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So then, as we work our way through, we kind of get to where Paul starts to kind of give, like, this roadmap.
Yeah.
After, we work through the warning and everything, and then he kind of gives, like, a roadmap for what, as believers and followers of Christ, what should that evidence look like? Yeah. And you kind of, like, listed some of it out. Do you want to pick a couple of those and kind of?
Yeah. So we get to we jumped over to 1 Thessalonians, and he talks about these things. I'll just read it. I've got a list of them here. Admonish the unruly. There is This one's tricky because there's some people that just love to blow other people up. And there's some people that just, they avoid any kind of confrontation at all cost. And the problem is it's like, do you want the ditch on the left side of the road or do you want the ditch on the right side of the road? And really the truth is right there in the middle. And you've heard a lot, I think, especially in today's culture, about judgment. We're not supposed to judge one another.
Right.
No, that's not true. We're actually, for those of us who profess Jesus, we're actually called to hold one another accountable to these certain things, and it's not judgment as much as it is, hey, you've said that you're going to live this way, and I see that you're not doing that in your life, and so he says, admonish the unruly, like people that are giving Christianity a bad name. Like we need to hold them to task on these things, and it's not for the intention you were talking earlier, like of I'm better than you, right? But as much as it says, look, our testimony is Jesus Christ and what He did, right? And so faith says you are king and I am not, and I'm gonna bend my knee and yield to your will.
It's almost like the sports analogy, right? Like it's less of a judging someone for doing wrong and more of a, hey, we're on the same team. I need to hold you accountable so that we're better together.
Yeah,
like we can run this race together.
You missed a block over there and it cost the team.
Right. So it's an accountability, not a judgment. Right?
Yes. And that's what he's saying. He's like, admonish the unruly. Like, don't just allow people to run rampant in their sin. And the more often that we're willing to do that, again, the undergirding of all of this is love. And so what does that look like? What does real love look like? Real love doesn't let your kid run out into the middle of a busy street. Right. In fact, sometimes when that kid is running towards that busy street, my reaction might scare the fire out of that kid because I recognize the danger. And I'm willing to go. And sometimes confrontation can be very scary, both for the one that's doing the confronting and the one that's being received, because there's this fear that says, if I'm exposed in this, I'm going to be outcast. Right. Well, that's not love. Right. No, love wants to encourage one another and to bring one another. And so I think that's a big part. He says, encourage the faint-hearted. One of the things that he was talking about in that race is that, hey, like, encourage one another. Like, we need to come alongside. There are going to be seasons in our life where all of us experience some of that. He says, help the weak, be patient with everyone. That's hard. At times, like, patience is
really that one's really easy for me.
Patience is a virtue, and I think the greatest way to learn patience is to raise toddlers, and marriage is perhaps another really good opportunity to exercise. Yeah, that's right. Don't repay evil. I think when you look at Jesus's life and you consider all of the things that these religious people were trying to do to him. I mean, it says that in one part of the Gospels, I can't remember the passage, but it was right after. It was the telling of the story of Palm Sunday, and they were coming to him because they knew of the work that the healing or the raising of the dead that he had from Lazarus, and so people were coming to see him and they were flocking to him. And it says that those religious leaders of that day, they determined at that part to kill him, like he needed to die. And Jesus knew all of this, and he never repaid the evil that was done to him with evil. It says, seek the good for one another and for all people. What does it look like to believe the best about someone, especially someone that's hurt me? I mean, like we're getting into we're getting into some really personal places
Yeah.
now. It's like,
Yeah.
Paul, you could have been a little bit more vague.
Yeah.
And I probably
Yeah.
could have explained
Yeah.
my way
This
out
didn't
of
have
this.
to apply to the fight I had with my wife last week.
That's
It didn't have
exactly
to
right.
be that perfect.
Am I like, and to go back and ask myself, like, can I before the Lord say that I was seeking her good or their good or, and again, seeking the good sometimes is, it sometimes leads us into uncomfortable places because I can think of times in my own life where, like I have been seeking the highest good for my kids, and it comes at a cost. Like it wounds them a little bit to do that. But the motivation of my heart should not be for retribution or to somehow make them pay for something, but the motivation should really be, am I doing this for their good? And then he says, rejoice. Rejoice in all things. Rejoice always. Certainly, we're going through in our own life right now with Kelly's cancer and everything. Like there's some really hard days, and the question is, are we going to choose to rejoice in the valley? And I think one thing that people struggle with when they hear things like rejoice is that their minds go towards like happiness or, I should be ecstatic over what we're going through. And I'm like, no, but I can rejoice in what's already been accomplished. And I know that, our future is secure. I know that Jesus is still on the throne, that he remains king over all these things. And I can rejoice in a lot of things. I rejoice in the community that we have, the life that he's given to us. I can rejoice in little things, and then I can rejoice in just the security of knowing. Pray without ceasing. Man, if there's one thing that I can encourage, especially men, is pray out loud and pray often. I can't tell you how many times I have encountered men, husbands, dads, that I always ask them, I'm like, when was the last time that you laid hands on your wife and prayed for her out loud? I've never done that.
Yeah.
When's the last time you laid your hands on your kid and you prayed for them before they walked out? And there's this fear. I'm not going to say the right thing. I'm going to get it wrong. And, and I think one of the reasons why we see some of the problems that we do is because we have neglected the power that a spoken word over our family, over our marriage, over one another really brings. And my heart would be that we would get back to these places that says, I'm gonna do these things often. Give thanks in everything. Like here's another one. Paul in his letter to the church at Philippi, speaking to the Philippians, he says, when in a fix, Philippians 4:6, just everybody remember. But what he says is, be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. And so this idea of giving thanks in everything is a common theme.
Yeah.
He goes on, don't quench the spirit. People are like, well, I don't know when I've heard the Spirit. I'm like, you've heard him.
Yeah.
Like, when you're sitting there and you've got two paths in front of you, and you know what your flesh wants,
right?
And you know what that voice inside is like going, don't do it.
Yep. Like
he says, don't ignore
right
what the Spirit is saying to you. Don't despise prophecy. What is prophecy? Man, there's so much contention over these things, and I think the moment people hear prophecy, they think like fortune telling, like I'm predicting the future. It's not what prophecy was.
Right.
Prophecy was being a mouthpiece for God, and sometimes that can look as simple as someone coming to me and saying, "Hey, I can see that your life is getting off track, and I think that what the Lord has for you is maybe in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
And being willing to really listen to that and say,
Right.
yeah, that's from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to do that. Examine everything. Dude, people post some crazy stuff.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, in today's day and age,
Wild times.
I mean, some of the things that people promote as though it's truth.
Yeah.
And just a simple glance at, like, does Scripture have anything to say about this?
Right,
You're like,
right.
oh my gosh, that's so far off base. Could we just, before we
Take a second,
click share, like go, it sounds good. Does it line up?
Just throw it in ChatGPT. Say,
Yeah,
hey,
I
is
mean,
this
like,
in the Bible anywhere?
Does Scripture support this in any way? Hold fast to the good. One of the things that Kelly and I have done a lot in the season of life that we're in is we have been intentional to really take time to reflect on all of the good that the Lord has brought into our life,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we're in the hard things, and we're going to hold fast to that. It's like, Lord, I know what you said.
Yep.
I know what you said in the good times, and so I'm going to hold on to that. Now that we're in the difficult, and then the last thing, it seems like the simplest of all, and I think it's why this life is so has so many tribulations and trials. He just says, abstain from evil.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we give ourselves a pass.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do, and evil again. The easiest way to give ourselves a pass on this is to go ahead and make it sound like evil is I didn't murder anybody today, or
Right.
I didn't have an affair.
Right.
I didn't. We tend to make evil much bigger, but really evil is anything that's not of God.
Mm-hmm.
And am I really willing to consider, was my response and my reaction in that moment a righteous response, or was this and evil in many ways is much broader than we give it credit for.
Yeah.
It's who am I going to serve? Am I going to listen to? Am I going to be king, or is he going to be king?
Right. Right. Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it gives, like, Paul in his lists, like when he lists out like the attributes of love, when he attributes of the fruits of the Spirit. I mean, he's pretty exacting, and I think that most of the time, like he's like, okay, Lord, is there anything else? I wonder if at times, like Paul, when he was writing these things and listening to the Lord, if he ever skipped over some and then like came back, he's like, fine, I'll put that in there, because that was like something that he really struggled with.
Yeah.
And we know that he did, because he talks about like I'm the worst.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So.
And just before we wrap, just like, I think it's cool it's almost like the lesson is in the list.
Yeah.
That like he talks about grace and how it abounds and how we need it, right? And then he gives you this list. And like, I don't know about you, but like I see a list, I'm like, okay, I got to check those boxes. I got to do the list.
Yeah.
And like the reality is it's impossible to do all of this, we need grace.
Yeah.
We can't do it without grace. So it's almost like the list is there to remind us that we need the grace, and vice versa,
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty cool.
Well, and I think that's the unique thing about grace. Like, we can't just make a decision that says, oh, okay, I'm going to accept grace today. Receiving grace requires humility, because I have to at first admit that I need it.
Yeah.
And it's not this flippant decision that's like, oh, yeah, no, God's grace covers that. And that's actually what I like about this next section of Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 13. Paul is like, hey, so grace is not cheap in the sense that we would think, oh, I've got grace.
Right.
And he says, like, grace does not give you a pass to do
Right.
whatever you want.
Right.
Like, it's not just this, oh, I screwed up, so I just go back to grace.
You can't assume.
No, there's a humility, and humility requires that I acknowledge what God says about my failure.
My lack,
Yeah, and it's like, and I think that's the beauty about grace is an acknowledgement that I can't do this on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, I need you. Like, I cannot do this on my own. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was that it?
I think so, man.
Okay.
We're good.
We did it.
Hey, yeah, we did it. Congratulations.
I don't know about the captain, but like maybe I held the wheel for, maybe someone's like, here, hold the wheel for a minute.
It's the little kid pushing the lawnmower with dad behind him.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you all for joining us for another episode of Monday Moments. Certainly, our heart is always that if you are in a place, if you're in a place of need, if you're in a place at this point where there just seems like the world is overwhelming, and you're just under the great weight of those things. Gosh, if I feel like I overdo it sometimes with my reminder about this, but find a Christian community, find a place where people will walk with you and challenge you and bring you to that place. And certainly, if you are local and you are not a part of a church, we would love to see you on a Sunday so that we can come alongside you and help you lead the life of the one who called you, who is Jesus. So thank you again for tuning in and joining us for another episode of Monday Moments. We look forward to seeing you again next week.